I teach some classes at a local Vietnamese university. The student asked me, well, when you invest, how do you know it's going to work? And I was like, well, I don't know it's going to work.
I know.
I don't know.
Welcome to VC. Peter Saddington, your big game hunter. And guys, we have our sights on someone special today. Only a mother could invest in this idea.
Made this like super artistic.
That is actually absolutely correct. And that's a very, very astute assessment, actually.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of VC Hunting with me, your big game hunter. I'm super excited for the third individual from Hustle Fund. It's Xiyan Koh, managing partner based in Singapore, usually. Thanks, Xiyan, for joining the show.
Thank you, Peter, for having me.
Well, I have done some research, some hunting on you, Xiyan. You have a great story. Let's start way back in the beginning, before you even got into venture capital. From what I understand, you wanted to be in civil service in university, policy and economics, if I remember correctly. So what happened? What happened? What changed?
What happened? Oh, man, that was so long ago. You did a lot of digging, Peter. That's a long way back. I think, let's see. I had an internship at a nonprofit, junior year of college in Washington, D.C. I sort of got a little bit disillusioned around, you could spend all this time fundraising and not actually that much time having an impact. And then my following summer, I did an internship with JP Morgan. And I didn't really think I was going to like it. But, my friend told me, it's only 10 weeks. You can do anything for 10 weeks. Just suck it up. And
that's great advice.
You could do anything for 10 weeks. It's not that hard. And I really liked it. I learned a lot. I was working with really smart people. I got access to see, public company CEOs and CFOs and how they were thinking about their companies and financing, their operations and growth. And so it seemed like it was a place where a lot of smart people were invested in teaching me stuff.
And I'm certain that we could spend a ton of time talking about what you learned there, but I'm assuming, you correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm assuming that having parents, both your mother and your father, both being in venture capital and investing, probably had some sway in your decision-making towards where you are today. Is that fair?
Yeah, I don't think I would have admitted it at the time, right? I think most kids just want to do the opposite thing from their parents. And then I, wound up doing the same thing, which is kind of funny now in retrospect. So yeah, but I think it definitely had an impact.
There's obviously some irony there. What do your parents think about you doing this full time now? Are they like, oh my gosh, I mean, venture capital is so hard. Startups are hard, but venture capital can, in its own way, can be ridiculously hard. So what do they think about you now being a full-time venture capitalist?
I mean, I think at this point, they trust me enough to make my own decisions. And so, I think they like that I've moved home to Singapore, so they're not really arguing with the decision. And yeah, I mean, I think more than anyone, they have an appreciation for how challenging the job is, but also how fun it can be, right? Mm-hmm. And, they continue to be very interested in, young teams, new technologies, how the world is being changed. And so it makes dinner conversations pretty fun.
Do you get to have, now being in Singapore for 2 years, do you now get to eat every night with your parents? Is that a cultural, a familial thing that you do out there?
I've been back for a year, and we probably eat dinner with them 2 or 3 times a week.
That's really unique. I mean, that's awesome. I mean, I say that kind of coming from my heart. It's like, I would love to have dinner with my parents or my in-laws because they make great food all the time. So you moved back to Singapore. And so your mandate, joining Hustle Fund, obviously you guys invest in hilariously early startups. Your mandate is going out to Singapore, looking at new investments, new opportunities out there. So being out there for a year, tell me, how's it been? How's the climate been? And what have you learned?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's actually been really fun. So I think for those who might not have spent much time in the region, Singapore is tiny, but it sits inside Southeast Asia, which is 10 countries that encompasses over 600 million people, the vast majority of whom are under the age of 28. It's a
Ooh.
very young region. There is super high cell phone and mobile connectivity penetration. Most people are mobile first. And I think what's exciting about it is for many people, they're just starting to come online. So it's a region where we're adding new internet users at a clip of 3 to 4 million a month. And people are super engaged. So if you look at some of the top social apps, like you think about TikTok or Facebook or Instagram, often in the top 3 or to 5 markets will be Indonesia or Vietnam. And that's just because you have a very young mobile first population. Economies are growing, so people are starting to have more disposable income to spend, and people are super engaged. So that's just been really fun to learn a new consumers. And there's a lot of great energy in the startup ecosystem, but it's, everything, if you benchmark it to Silicon Valley, it's very nascent, right? It's just like the beginnings of an ecosystem. And I would say that you're in Atlanta, right, Peter?
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely.
I would say that it even Atlanta is, further progressed than Southeast Asia, but that's part of the excitement of being there is, helping to be part of that growth, work with young teams, share some of our experiences from Silicon Valley, and hopefully, find the next set of unicorns.
Well, I think it's really interesting. I think there's been, for you to move out to Singapore and to be part of Hustle Fund really is a convergence of 3 things that were really important to you at that time in life. If I can move back just a little bit, after NerdWallet, I was looking through your blog, which is Cul-de-sac. On September 5th, 2018, after you were about like 6 months out of NerdWallet and a VP there, you said that you had traveled to Singapore, Indonesia, Vietnam, Myanmar, and you were thinking about 3 options: either joining another company, starting your own company, or starting a fund. But I think what was nice during that time is you were having this urge to move back to Singapore, and the market opportunity certainly was there. So the third thing would be, you love being part of the building process of new ecosystems. Is that fair?
Yeah. I mean, I think anybody who's ever started a company or started any organization, right? It's like you get to decide what happens. And you can look and say, hey, 3 years ago there was nothing and now there's something, and I was a big part of making something happen.
Wow.
And so that's like super fun.
What are you most excited about from what you've seen so far being out there for a year? I know we're talking about mobile first, and we can probably assume a lot of social applications, certainly. But what are some of the things that have surprised you having been in Singapore so far?
Surprised me. That's a good question. I think it's surprising a little bit how there are certain things that are very universal, right?
Okay.
I mean, and that probably shouldn't be that surprising, right? But the fact that there are people who use Facebook or YouTube as their homepage. So, if you watch some people on their phones and what they're doing, when they search, they don't search in Google, they search in YouTube.
Really?
Yeah. Or like, they don't use email, they just use Facebook and Messenger.
Wow.
So it's like
So there's a different level of saturation, different level of use case and utility that we Western.
So like if you think like in the 90s we had AOL, which was like a closed garden, right?
Right.
And then everyone's like, no, the internet's not supposed to be a closed garden, it's supposed to be an open internet, right? And then now we have supposedly like all this choice, but then people have created their own closed garden because they live inside Facebook or they live inside YouTube.
Right.
And so I think that's like pretty fascinating to watch. And a lot of people don't have emails, right? So everything is through WhatsApp or, in certain countries, Line Messenger. And so all the flows, whether it's support, or what's your user flow, when you kick off like, hey, sign up for an account, you're not asking for an email address because people would be like, what do you mean? Right?
Yeah, of course. Because I mean,
So,
for us
so
out here, we think email's standard operating procedure is part of the left kidney that you have to give when you try to sign up for anything. But
exactly.
out east, you don't need it.
So that's like interesting. Like you just see like different. So like there is like the stuff that's like super similar, right? So everyone loves posting photos of themselves,
Mm,
living their best lives. But then how they use it day to day, how they message, how they communicate, I think all those things are very region specific. So that's been super interesting. What am I most excited about? I just think it's exciting that like you have 600 million people who their habits haven't really been set yet. And so there's so
ah,
much opportunity for people to come and build new things um, that take advantage of the fact that you don't need to refurbish a web property into mobile. Like
mm,
if you think about a lot of the things that we use, they all started as web first, and then they sort of made this mobile transition. And then there's new things that have started out as mobile first, right? Like if I try to think about things like TikTok is probably the first like big mobile first thing.
right.
Everything else came from the web era, right? And so now you have a region where people don't really have that many set habits. They are all mobile first. So you have a chance to like really like next gen, how you think about what you're using with them. So that's kind of fun. So I'm really excited to see kind of what emerges out of that.
I
And
would
so I
ass-
think,
I would
go ahead.
assume. I'm sorry.
No, that's it. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I would assume we're talking about these new nascent out there in Singapore and out in the Asia Pacific Rim are new nascent technologies to them, and you're talking about new habits. These habits haven't been set yet. I would assume then that would require someone like you to really be introspective around your own mental models that you've brought in from the West. Let's be intellectually honest, right? And really reassess how you're viewing their usage, their utility of these apps in this totally different ways. And I would assume that would require you to be really self-aware that you don't bias or lead the witness when you're talking with these individuals and these founders out there. How have you found the cultural difference or the culture shock difference between their behaviors and the Western behaviors, and how have you had to change your models?
When I first started in investing, my first investing job was more than 10 years ago. Uh, my boss at the time said to me, just pay attention to how people spend time or how people spend money.
Ooh.
So he said, it doesn't matter if you would use it, right? You are not the user most of the time.
Mm.
It just matters if lots of other people want to use it, right? And if they're spending time or money, you should pay attention. And so I think the same is true in this scenario, right? Like there are certain things that I would never use. But millions of people use it. They spend a ton of time and they spend a ton of money, and so we should pay attention. And so I think that's the important thing to think about is like, I think bias exists anywhere, right? We all bring
Mm.
our own set of experiences and biases to the table. But, the one thing that I think is something that you have to consciously adjust for is because there wasn't anything before, consumers' expectations are lower. And so
Ooh.
they're willing to put up with more bad UI or
Ah.
suboptimal flows. And so, when you're using it, you're testing it, you're like, oh, this sucks, right? You're like, I don't want to like fill out 13 forms on a mobile device, like
Right.
whatever. But then when you look at their conversion numbers, maybe they're like really high. You're like, well, all these other people are willing to like fill out all this stuff to get to the end. So I think that's one thing, but I think it still goes back to like, are people spending time and are people spending money? And you should pay attention when that thing happens.
Mm.
So I think that's interesting. I think a lot of it is just about watching consumers, talking to consumers, talking to customers, and just being like, I love whenever I go to a new place, I want to see what is on people's home screen.
That's a
So,
great.
like,
That's
and there are a
great.
few things that are always there, right? So like WhatsApp is always there, Facebook is always there, but then their payment things are totally different. People use different e-commerce sites. In Vietnam, a lot of people have like English learning apps.
Oh
So they're
yeah.
trying to like teach themselves more English. So it's just really interesting to like see all this consumer behavior, and sort of try to build a mental model of like, okay, like if I were 22 in Ho Chi Minh, like, what would I be trying to do, right? Not like I'm 37 in San Francisco with 2 kids. Like, it's different.
Yeah, well, I was just going to ask, if you were 22 in Ho Chi Minh, what would you be doing? What would you be wanting to do?
I mean, I would probably be trying to improve my English. I might be learning a skill on the side. A lot of people have side hustles. They're all like doing a job, doing a side hustle. They don't stay in jobs very long. They'll move if
very transient.
more money. But I'm thinking about, when can I afford a house, like an apartment? I want my own apartment one day. And so, and this is a very funny thing. A lot of young Vietnamese I talk to, like, they all want to be their own boss. Ooh. So they're like thinking about like, what businesses do I want to start, things like that.
Why do you think that is? What culturally has created a pattern, or at least an observable pattern, that these young individuals all want to be their own boss? What has created that, do you think?
I don't know. I mean, totally unscientifically, I feel like it's like almost similar to like what happened in China, 20 years ago. It's like,
ooh, tell me more.
They were like, in communism, they didn't have a lot of choice, right? Mm-hmm. And then as things started to liberalize, people started to be like, oh, I could start a business doing this. Like, I see a need, I can fill it, I can make money doing it. And then you're like, oh, wow, this is great, right? And so it's sort of this like explosion of entrepreneurship as the market becomes
liberated.
Yeah. And you see that. And I think like there's something about the zeitgeist of, you don't necessarily want to work for the man. That's not that sexy. You want to.
I don't think it's ever been sexy, Xian, to work for the man.
No, but like you go to places like, Hong Kong or Singapore, and like it's pretty prestigious to like
be the salary man, yeah.
Work for Goldman Sachs or be a corporate lawyer or whatever it is. But I don't get exactly that same sense in Vietnam. So people are like got a lot of side hustles. And looking for opportunity and like very high desire to learn, which is just super cool.
It really is cool.
So yeah, I mean, it's very funny. Like I teach some classes at a local Vietnamese university.
Okay.
And so
what are your subjects?
I mean, it's like entrepreneurship and venture capital. And it's just, the student asked me, well, when you invest, how do you know it's going to work? And I was like, well, I don't know it's going to work.
I know.
I don't know.
Welcome to VC.
Yeah. And they're like, well, wait, what? And then, they're like, well, how do you think about whether you invest? So you walk through like, okay, like market, product, team, traction, that kind of stuff. And they're like, but how do you know? And I was like, I don't know. And it just like makes their heads explode.
Well, I think that probably is an also awesome opportunity to tell them about your thesis. I mean, I know because you guys, I probably should have put a disclaimer at the beginning of this, you guys have invested in my company. So knowing that, you guys invest in hilariously early hustlers, guys who grind. And so yeah. I'm sure part of your answer to them is like, do you have the character of no quit? Are you willing to persevere and grind through the suck? So I'm sure you're also giving them some tough truths there as well, right?
Yeah, but I think like the thing that I think is hard, and you've done a lot of startup stuff, so you have a perspective on this, but I think if you sit outside the ecosystem of tech and startups, you don't actually see how much failure there is. Right? Because like, unless it's like massive failure, right?
Right.
But like, there's so many like
much fail.
Yeah, there's so much fail. And so you're like, oh, there must be like some magical thing that if you find it, like success is instant and overnight. And they don't actually see that like success is mostly like very winding, rather accidental, and a lot of grinding. And so I think that's like, they don't totally understand that so many things can change the course of a business. And like it is equal parts like insanity and exhilaration. But that's, I think, a little bit of like, what I'm trying to communicate to them in some of this stuff, which is like, hey, you too could start a business. And there are definitely some best practices, but
you got to want it, baby.
It's kind of a crapshoot. So, here are ways you can try to increase your chances of success, but there's no guarantees. And that's kind of what makes it fun.
And these are the types of stories that I like hearing, because this is the real Xian. This is the real, right? It's the real. You can go to business school. You can even if you're out where Xian is, you can go to one of her classes. She'll certainly teach you about product market fit and all the great opportunities and all the great ways to create a framework around your idea. But at the end of the day, it's about execution. It's about no quit, pivoting if it doesn't work, lots of fail, and enjoying the process. And one thing I can tell you this, one of the things that I have appreciated the most of all the startups that I've built with my co-founders is that on the day that I want to kill myself, they're there to be like, hey, it's okay. We're good. We got traction. We're moving. And then on the days that they want to end their life, I'm like, dude, we got it. So, I mean, like for me as a founder, for me as an entrepreneur, whenever I talk with young bloods who are trying to get in the game, I say, hey, find that co-founder who will help you make sure that you take the noose off your neck when you want to end it. And so these are the real reals here. But I want to get back a little bit. You were talking about, and I really like this. I think it might be the second time I've ever heard it. And the first time was when I was out in Tokyo, but with another entrepreneurship group that I was working with at the time. But you said that you like being able to see what's on their home screen on their phone, right? That tells you a lot. And so my question is other than, just saying, hey, young lady, young man, show me what's on your home. What are some ways that you're getting out and finding those hustlers, finding those grinders, finding those individuals and founders with grit? What are some of the opportunities that are emerging out where you are, where you can plug in and find what's going on?
Yeah, I mean, I think we do a fair amount of content marketing, right? So we try to write, we try to tweet stuff that we're seeing. I teach classes, so both at Singapore Management University in Singapore and at Fulbright University in Ho Chi Minh. And then I do regular events in Jakarta as well in Indonesia. And so those are opportunities for us to, share some of our thoughts, meet more folks in the community. But, it's kind of funny. I think most people will find you in this day and age because we're pretty active on Twitter. They'll DM and they'll be like, hey, here's what I'm about. Are you interested? Do you want to talk? I'll run into people at conferences. And then increasingly, because we have so many portfolio companies, they'll come in through our portfolio CEOs. They'll be like, hey, I'm friends with Peter. I'm friends with John. They said, I should come chat with you all and see if, you'd be interested in my business. And so we have this sort of large and growing army of founders and partners who will send us deals. But I think mostly it's just sort of like, it's always cool to see people doing things that they're super passionate about and that they have a point of view on. So I think I always ask people, like, what is your theory of the world? And like, why is it different from what other people believe?
I like that. What is your theory of the world and why do you believe what you believe?
Yeah, because like, there's lots of really smart people in the world, right? And if the only thing that you're trying to do is like, okay, well, I think I'm smarter than another person, that's like a really hard thing to defend.
It really is.
Right. And like, I don't know. I mean, I can't validate that. It's hard to defend. It's hard to fund. So, but, if someone's like, hey, I worked in this business, I know this customer set, and the current players all think about their problem in this way. But because I've spent all this time doing, support for these people or whatever, I know that their real problem that they don't really talk about as much is this other thing. And so I want to go try to attack it from that dimension. Then that's sort of like, you have a theory of the world, right? And you have a theory of like why it's different. And also like, why is it hard for other people to do the thing that you want to do?
Ooh. I'm gonna throw this right back at you, Xian.
Okay.
What is your theory of the world when it comes to your mandate in Singapore and the Asia Pacific region? What is your view of the world? What is your theory of the world? Why do you believe what you believe? What's driving you is what I'm asking.
Well, I mean, so there's two pieces to it. I think one is like, what is our theory of pre-seed? right? So our theory of pre-seed is basically you don't really know anything about anyone until you work with them.
Exactly.
That's our theory of the world, right? And that we think that's like just a really hard thing to learn about someone in their business just through pitching. And so that's why we write a check and then we do a growth project, because we think that's like the best way to learn.
And we're so happy that we passed.
But that's I think that's our theory of the world in pre-seed. And why is it different? I think it's different because, like for a long time, venture capital was more of a cottage industry, more artisanal, right? Smaller set of players, everyone was referred in, and
clubbed up deals.
Yeah, clubbed up deals, and then also, we talk a lot about warm intros and things like that, right? But like our perspective is, hey, if you only look at warm intros, you really just preference people who already have privilege and connections, and that doesn't necessarily correlate with best execution. Although people make the argument like, well, if you're really good, you can always like worm your way in somehow. But yeah, so we're trying to say like, well, the thing we care about is business results, right? Like that's what we're really trying to figure out. And so are there ways that we can find that in a way that doesn't rely on people having access or network?
Right.
And so that's sort of like our theory of pre-seed. And then I think on Southeast Asia, it's starting to change, but I think many venture investors don't necessarily want to invest out of the US or out of their neighborhoods because they're like, hey, we don't really know that.
It's a nascent industry. It's even more highly risky than Silicon Valley. So
yeah, you don't want to take geography risk, you don't want to take regulatory risk, currency risk, things like that. And I think what we think is building software is not that different. It doesn't really matter where you sit. How software gets built is still pretty similar.
And
I would agree. The process of understanding customers is still pretty similar. Your customer may be different, but the process by which you learn about your customer is not that different. And so if we believe like, hey, because of AWS, because of, React, Slack, all the new sort of stack, you can build great things anywhere. And there's a geography that has a customer base that's kind of underpenetrated and underaddressed. And we think software is built in a fairly similar way. We think we can still have a reasonable perspective on whether somebody's going to be a great business or a great founder. And so I think that is different from, maybe classical investors who are more US focused.
Well, certainly going out into a new region, a new region, a new culture is a market segment in its own. And then we can even market segment Singapore into its SaaS-based B2B, B2C, et cetera, But just looking at the meta level, I mean, going out to a completely different country, that is a market segment with ridiculous unknowns. And so it really is the way of the wild, wild west. And you get the opportunity, if you have the hardy heart to do it and the grit to do it, to really make your mark on it and leave your mark and leave your mark there and help build it, as you said earlier. So I think this is only for the select few who are willing to go out there. So you must have adventure on your mind.
Yeah. I guess so.
You have to be.
I'm from Singapore originally, so I grew up there. So maybe it's not as risky in my mind. But I think it's always good to switch things up a little bit because if you stay in one place too long, I think your thinking gets a little bit stale.
I would completely.
I mean, that's why people travel, right? Or they pick up new hobbies or things like that. I think it's important to just try to keep things a little bit fresh and force your brain to jog a bit.
Absolutely. Well, I've got just a couple more questions. We'll wind it down here. The first should be relatively exciting, I hope. What are you looking forward to in 2020? This is a question that as I was looking and researching about you and going into your past, I was like, I bet she has a great answer for this. What are you looking forward to in 2020? What's one thing that you're excited about or anticipating that's coming up, if you can conjure it up?
Yeah, I mean, we just came out of our team offsite in Sonoma.
I did see that.
We got to spend really good quality time together. And I think I'm just really excited that now, we've got a larger team. We've got some goals and outcomes we're really excited about trying to deliver in 2020. We're starting to invest out of our second fund. And that just gives us, we've got like fund one under our belts. We've learned a bunch of stuff. And now we're going to try to take those learnings and put them into fund two, but also continue to think about how do we serve our portfolio companies even better next year, right? So what have we learned from 2+ years of working portfolio companies, and how do we improve on the delivery?
Can I ask about I know offsite, sometimes some of that stuff is internal to the company and but I don't want to pry too much, but is there one of those what's one of those learnings that you came out from the offsite that you can share with us?
Yeah. I mean, I think there are a number of things where we feel like, I think if you've had the same conversation with founders like 5 times, like 5 different founders, and you feel like the same conversation, you're like, oh, maybe this is a need, right? Like maybe we should productize this. And so, we sort of made a list of those things that we thought would be really useful to people. So like one, super basic, but hey, like legal clinic, how to work with your lawyer.
Yeah.
So, hey, guess what? Your lawyer charges you in 6-minute increments. How do you maximize their time while they're charging a bunch of money?
Yes.
But like when do you use lawyers? How do you use them? At which stages? And how do you get the most out of them? Because a really great lawyer can really help a business. But I think often, either people are like want to save money, so they don't bring them until it's too late, or they don't want to read docs, or like, it feels unfamiliar. So you just sort of outsource it. You're like, oh, do this thing for me, but you don't give them any guidance. And so then you like run up a big legal bill. So I think like, I think about it as like, how do you reduce unforced errors? Right. I can't make your business what it's not, but I can at least try to help reduce unforced errors. So like things like, hey, legal stuff. One, I thought topic, which is pretty interesting, is, how do you build relationships with potential acquirers? So like, hey, maybe you're in an industry, let's say, digital health, right? And there's probably like 10 or 15 potential big acquirers down the road. Not now, but like 3-5 years from now. What should you be doing or thinking about doing as you're progressing your business? And so bringing in, we have some LPs and friends who are like, senior corp dev people, just bringing them in to like share their experiences of how they work with startups, what is best practice and things like that. So I think there's a bunch of these things where you're like, hey, we can really add value. I mean, okay, here's the most recent one. Did you know that, so it used to be in California, if you had 50 or more employees, you had to do sexual harassment training every year. But now the law has changed to 5 or more employees.
Oh, really?
So previously, right? Like it wouldn't really have affected any of our startups. Yeah, but previously really wouldn't have affected any of our startups because like not that many, pre-seed companies have more than 50 employees.
Right.
Now you're like, oh wait, so like I'm talking with some providers about like, hey, how can we find a way to deliver this thing cost effectively to our portfolio, right? And like, so this is what I'm saying. Like, what are things we can do to just like help our companies out and
I think I will tell you the legal, huge. I can't tell you, and maybe I'm going to speak with a little bit of passion here, but I've been burned so bad. Your lawyers, if any of you're out there, guys, and your founders, your lawyers are a representative of you. And if you have bad lawyers, they can say things and they can mess up deals because they're like oil and water with the LPs or oil and water with the investors or the angels. Please, like this, I'm glad you're doing this, Xian. I'm glad you guys are hustle fun and putting this together because I could tell you war stories of how lawyers, or I've literally had to tell lawyers in the legal team, just like, you didn't do this right. You didn't engage right. You offended them. And that's bad for me, right? And so like these are the things that new founders often don't think about. They say, you use the word quickly. Well, we just outsource our legal. And I think there needs to be a little bit more consideration going on there. So I really appreciate that. Let's round this out. I got just a couple quick questions that you can answer quickly. Sure. Trust me, they'll be fun. But again, we do some digging here. So I'm going to ask you this first one. On November 28th, 2009, Xian, we're going back a year, 10 years. On Twitter, November 28th, 2009, you said, oh, I'm going to learn how to field dress a deer. Venison is very nice. It's like Jichar. Hashtag I love Singaporeans. How did that go? How did your first field dressing a deer 10 years ago, almost to the date? How did that go?
Oh my God. I don't even. It's just, gosh, where do you find these things?
I'm the interview of venture capital that no one ever knew was possible because I do digging. You don't remember your first field dressing a deer on November 28th,
2009?
Yeah.
It's insane. That's so long ago.
You said it's just like Zichar. What's Zichar? I'm probably pronouncing it wrong.
Zita is
Zichar.
it's a style of cuisine where you go to a restaurant and they don't really have a menu. They just buy like whatever's freshest that day in the market, and then the chef like makes whatever. And then over time, different chefs will develop reputations for like
Their
really
style.
good dishes, right? But you basically can say like, oh well, you know, what fresh vegetables do you have today? And then they'll be like this, and then you'll be like, well, do you want it like steamed? Do you want it fried with garlic? Do you want it this way, this way, this way, this way? So that's tough. I would say, you know, I don't think I'm cut out for hunting, and you know, venison is delicious if other people make it.
I'll take that. That's a perfect answer. Last question, and then we'll let you go. We're going back again, 10 years, November 12th on 2009. This is really intriguing. I just had to snag this one, Xian. No context, by the way. You just said Twitter and YouTube as the new, quote, great Satan. do you she's gone, guys. She's gone. I didn't know what that meant. I mean, did you have a moment where you were like, holy cow, YouTube and Twitter are gonna like be the overlords? Is that tell us what if you can, what
2009.
November 12th, 2009, you said verbatim, Twitter and YouTube as the new, quote, great Satan.
Wow. I know. I don't even remember tweeting that. And I would imagine that like it probably had something to do with like misinformation. That like people could just propagate all sorts of crazy ideas through Twitter.
Was that even a thing back in 2009?
Yeah, I mean,
you were way ahead of the curve there, Xian.
No. Remember
fake news.
So I don't know if you remember this, but do you remember the Mumbai bombings?
Yeah.
And for a long time,
it was trending on Twitter during that.
Yeah, but for a long time, the major news agencies didn't really know what was going on.
That's right.
And the best sources were coming out through Twitter, but it was very confusing, right? Because it's like, oh, there's how many gunmen? Like, oh no, this explosion here, like blah 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 blah. And that was, I think, when was that? When was the Mumbai bombings? I think it was back then. So I think that was probably what it was referenced to. Yeah, Mumbai bombings were November 2008. So.
Well, there you go. You were great Satan. You were the great Satan. The great Satan. So we'll leave it at.
Gosh. What a note to end on.
What a note to end on. We'll give you the last rites. Give us your spiel for Hustle Fund and why, if you're a founder out in Singapore or founder anywhere, doesn't matter, why you should check out Hustle Fund, see either Eric, Elizabeth, or obviously Xian. The floor is yours.
Oh my God.
Instead of Satan.
I would say, I think choosing investors is important because you're kind of stuck with them for a long time. And so you should come work with us if, you want people who tell you like it is. They'll say it like it is. We're very direct, very straightforward.
I can verify that.
Can you attest to that? We love working with entrepreneurs. We are founders and operators ourselves. We enjoy the building, the early stage, the suck, as you call it. And, my partner, Eric, always says this thing, which I think is a little bit cheesy, but is totally true. So he says, we want to work with people that we can grow old together with. And I think that's like spot on, actually.
Your first post on your blog on Cul-de-sac, you talked about having neighbors that were close.
Yeah. So you wanna, it's spot on. Even though it sounds cheesy, and I think one of the greatest joys in life is to be able to work with people you really enjoy. because even like you said, when things are really tough, they'll, talk you off the ledge. They'll be like, it's going to be okay. We're going to work through this. And then when you ultimately succeed, that feeling of having succeeded with people you love through thick and thin is amazing. It's like really hard to replicate. So that's what I would say about it. And, maybe you'll identify with this too, which is another founder I was talking to. He said, working at high growth startups is like a drug. He's like, I thought I could walk away, but I want it. And I think that's kind of true, because you know why? Because early stage companies, early stage investing is all about optimism. Because you can say no to everything. Everything can sound like a stupid idea. You're like, that's stupid, that's stupid, that's stupid.
Right.
But you have to have some small amount of optimism, or you'll never write a check, or you'll never start a company, right? You'll just be stuck, doing whatever. And so when you get to surround yourself with optimists, I think that just gives you a much more positive outlook on life.
I think that's perfect. I love it. I love it. I love it. Guys, make sure that you find your way over to hustlefund.vc and you can fill out an application and maybe, just maybe, get one of those quick $25,000 checks. But I'm not promising anything. Thanks, Xian, for being on the show.
Thanks, Peter. Really appreciate it.
Well, guys, I really hope you enjoyed that conversation that I had with Xiyan Koh from Hustle Fund. And if I didn't say it earlier, I think I did say it actually, but I should have. I always forget, but Xian has invested in me before. She's currently invested in me. So that's a disclaimer. So there might be a little bit of a bias there. But one of the things that I really appreciated about Xian, we've interviewed the other two founders of Hustle Fund, Eric Bond and Elizabeth Yin. So make sure that you check those interviews out for sure. But one of the things that I really appreciate about Xian is just the way that she delivers and the way that she communicates. It's true, it's thoughtful, it's considerate. And I don't mind. And this is one of the things that as I'm working through this show and figuring out the cadence to it and trying to find my voice, this is something that we actually talked about after we had pressed the record or turned off the record button. Is she asked me, what have you learned so far? And I told her, I said, hey, I'm needing to find my own voice again. And so I appreciate that, those awkward moments, those awkward silences of consideration as she's thinking about her answer to my questions. I just loved her story. I love reading about her story. Obviously, I've known a lot previously, but you guys out there hadn't heard it before. But, going into university, wanting to be a policy and economics major, to moving into venture capital, where her parents, that's their career choice. So maybe the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree there. But one of the things that I really appreciated is her detailing out of her experiences in Singapore. And I just love learning these things. I love learning that there's 600 million people in that region, span over 10 countries, and they're young. Most of them are under 28 years old, and they have new habits, or not new habits, but they have their own habits, their own behaviors, their own consumption behaviors of how they use technology that are different from our Western world. And this is exciting. This is really exciting. And the reason is because their habits are different, because their consumption habits and their behaviors are different. This gives the entrepreneur an entirely new opportunity to serve that behavior, to serve that consumption habit, which is different than the Western world, which means you can make money on it. And for an entrepreneur who loves greens fields, for an entrepreneur who loves to build, as Xiyan Koh obviously does, she likes to be part of the narrative, right? Part of the story, having her fingerprint in it and helping create from nothing there. For the entrepreneur who enjoys that adventure, you can be deeply and greatly rewarded. So I really appreciate I really appreciated her stories about Singaporeans and Asian Pacific individuals and their own behaviors. I did find this funny though, that I stumped her. I stumped her about the venison. Sometimes people just can't remember these things. But she did remember the quote about Twitter and YouTube being the great Satan. It was just such a random tweet. I love her answer to what she's looking forward to in 2020. So they recently, Hustle Fund recently just had an all hands management meeting, a retreat, and they're looking at helping their companies like us. They're helping their investments. They're looking to improve the way that they can serve their investments. And I love that. And I love that. What else? Yeah. What a great conversation. We talked a lot about what this. Yeah, we spent a lot of time talking about other stuff offline, and I don't want to bring it up because it's not in my notes. Guys, make sure that you subscribe. We're all over the place. Go to vchunting.com or vchunting.com/guests, something like that. Go over to vchunting.com guests, and you'll see that we're syndicating all over the place. So Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, all over the podcasts. Subscribe to your favorite medium. Also, make sure that you subscribe to our newsletter. That's important too. If you enjoyed this episode, guys, with Xiyan Koh from Hustle Fund, make sure that you find your way over to vchunting.com/Xiyan Koh. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.